Is the Brazilian national football team still the greatest in history? After all, they have 5 World Cups. Brazil is the most successful team in history. They have been in 7 finals and 4 semi-final appearances. Only Germany has more top 4 finishes, with 8 finals and 5 semi-finals. However, in recent years, it seems that Brazil has been losing its greatness, if we can even speak in those terms. Or will this greatness never be lost? But in the end, what is happening with the Brazilian national team? The Brazilian national team is going through a turbulent moment. One of the most troubled periods in its rich history, for sure. Of course, nothing surpasses that moment after the 7-1 loss in the 2014 World Cup. But nowadays, there is a strong period of identity crisis, lack of perspective, and a loss of credibility regarding the team. However, the crisis that affects Brazilian football is not limited to just the field. The crisis starts at the top of the pyramid, with the CBF, Brazilian Football Confederation, and extends through all other sectors, such as state football federations, the clubs themselves, young players, coaches, professional players, and, of course, the connection with the team. But first, we need to recognize that the average Brazilian fan is demanding. When I say demanding, I refer to the level of pressure and expectation when it comes to the Brazilian national team. The fans want to see beautiful football, playing offensively and dominating other teams, regardless of their size. Brazil has to play on the attack and win every game. But we know that football doesn't work like that. There are many factors for this to happen. However, the key point here is that it's very difficult for Brazil to establish such dominance in every game. We experienced such moments during Tite's tenure as a coach of Brazil, but without facing first-tier challenges due to the lack of matches against stronger teams like Spain, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, England, etc. England, for example, was only faced by Brazil once in a friendly match that ended 1-1. Over the course of 6 years, the main criticism of the head coach's work centered around the lack of these kinds of challenges, which were crucial to prepare Brazil for moments like those in a World Cup. And of course, we know that the Brazilian team was eliminated by Belgium in 2018 and Croatia in 2022, which ultimately put the entire development of the current Flamengo coach's work in question. After Tite's departure, the CBF, led by Edinaldo Rodrigues, promised a top-tier European football coach to lead Brazil moving forward. Carlo Ancelotti from Real Madrid was the name endorsed by the CBF president. As a result, Brazil lost valuable time. Tite announced early in 2022 that he would not continue as head coach beyond the World Cup. CBF simply assumed that any coach would accept the role once invited. Edinaldo decided to chase a dream without having an actual plan for the project. Initially, Ramon Menezes was appointed as coach, despite already performing poorly with both the U20 and Olympic teams. Ramon, who wasn't to blame in this instance, witnessed Brazil suffer a humiliating 4-2 defeat against Senegal. Following this, Edinaldo appointed Fluminense coach Fernando Diniz as interim manager while he continued his duties at the club, where he eventually won the Copa Libertadores at the end of 2023. However, Diniz's tenure with the national team quickly unraveled in just 6 matches. After losing Neymar to injury, Brazil failed to win any further games in the World Cup qualifiers. Carlo Ancelotti, who had never committed to coaching Brazil, renewed his contract with Real Madrid, leaving CBF president in a difficult situation. At the time, Ronaldo was facing a tumultuous period in his presidency, which he later regained through a court ruling. In desperation, Ronaldo dismissed Diniz and turned to Dorival Jr., the coach of São Paulo, to take over the national team. Dorival started strong, facing tough friendly matches. He secured a victory against England and a draw against Spain, in a match where Brazil was heavily affected by controversial refereeing decisions. However, in the Copa America, the Brazilian team disappointed with a poor performance, and several moments during the tournament were met with heavy criticism from both the media and fans. The incident involving Captain Danilo arguing with a fan after the poor 0-0 draw against Costa Rica. Vinicius Jr.'s confrontation with a journalist after receiving fair criticism regarding his on-field performance. And of course, the remarks made by striker Endrick following the elimination, where he said the players could have been on vacation at that time but chose to sacrifice themselves for the Brazilian national team. Additionally, the notable moment when coach Dorival Jr. was seen being ignored by the players during the penalty shootout against Uruguay. All these factors contributed to the biggest crisis since 2014. From the fans' perspective, everything is lacking. However, in my view, this is the least of the problems. We also needed to discuss the media's relationship with the national team. The Brazilian media loves to hype up every sport in which Brazilians are competing, embracing the moment and genuinely cheering for Brazil's success. However, when it comes to football, it seems that such enthusiasm is frowned upon and, to some extent, considered inappropriate. It's common to see media professionals wearing Argentina jerseys and praising Argentine football achievements, which are just as problematic as, if not more so than, Brazilian football. These same professionals often seem indifferent to Brazil's success in football. There's a sense that they are more interested in being right in their criticisms than in supporting Brazil's football success at the international level. This attitude is, at the very least, peculiar. We've become accustomed to commentators like Galvão Bueno and Luciano do Valle covering the national team, and while constructive criticism has always been valuable, it's also important to emphasize that supporting the team and wanting the best for them is crucial. When did it become negative to cheer for the national team? What's wrong with that? Some might argue this CBF team doesn't represent me, or there are no good players in the national team, among other complaints. But that's not accurate. Distancing oneself from the national team solely because of the CBF should have been the case since the days of the CBD. The Brazilian Confederation has always been problematic. Brazil succeeded despite the shortcomings of both the CBD and the CBF. Using this as an argument as if it were only a recent issue is simply ignoring the reality. Regarding the quality of the players, that's also incorrect. The point is that all others national teams are improving their level and getting better, making games more difficult for everyone, not just for Brazil. Brazil is the only country in the world to have at least one player in the Champions League final, the biggest club tournament since the 90s. It's hard to believe that this isn't a factor in favor of the national team. How can players of the caliber of Vini Jr., Rodrigo, Gabriel Martinelli, Richarlison, and many others be seen as a problem rather than a solution? The main issue is how to get these players to perform for the national team the way they do for their clubs. They cannot be the problem, they are part of the solution. How do we address this? Well, that's the coach duty. The coach of the Brazilian national team cannot be complacent with just one tactical scheme or one style of play. This tactical poverty significantly hampers the overall development of the national team. Coaches from other countries manage to get our players to perform at the highest level in their clubs. Why do the players struggle when playing for Brazil? It's worth noting that many of the top coaches in Brazilian football are also foreigners, particularly from Portugal and Argentina. The exception is Flamengo, which has a Tite as its coach. Among the top 10 teams in the Brazilian Championship, only 4 teams have Brazilian coaches. The other 6 have foreign coaches. Of the 20 teams in Serie A, 9 teams have foreign coaches. This is something to consider. Why have Brazilian coaches fallen behind? Why have they lost market share to foreign coaches? Juan Pablo Voivoda, an Argentinian at Fortaleza, and Abel Ferreira, a Portuguese at Palmeiras, are the coaches with the longest tenures in Brazilian football, each with over 3 years leading their respective clubs. Another extremely important factor that many people overlook is identity. Brazilian football, generally focused on profiting from player sales, has stopped looking inward and developing players for domestic clubs. Instead, the emphasis has shifted to creating players for international sales. And what do European clubs buy the most? Wingers! Specifically, inverted wingers, meaning left wingers who play with their right foot and right wingers who play with their left foot. As a result, the focus on developing players in various positions has become secondary. If Europe buys fewer fullbacks, we produce fewer fullbacks. If Europe buys fewer attacking midfielders, we shift our focus away from that position. If Europe isn't buying as many center forwards, that's fine. Europe prefers to buy wingers, defensive midfielders, and defenders. Okay, let's produce players geared towards sales to Europe. This instinctive focus on sales, without regard for actual player development, has led Brazil to sacrifice its own footballing identity to create players that appeal to European clubs. As a result, there has been an explosion of defenders, defensive midfielders, and wingers for the Brazilian national team. If you look closely, you'll notice that the pool of players available for each position has shifted, leading to a problem with the fullbacks, attacking midfielders, and center forwards. We now have an abundance of defenders, defensive midfielders, and especially wingers. Meanwhile, European teams and clubs are once again focusing on the positions that are currently in short supply in Brazil. Want an example? Germany, with Jamal Musiala and Florian Wirtz, 2 classic number 10s. Do they play other roles? Of course, but their primary role is as number 10s. Brazil, aiming for sales to Europe, has given up on the key position that once made Brazilian football famous worldwide. Today, Pelé would be a left winger trying to fit into the system. Rivaldo would have to adapt as a third midfielder or a center forward. Bebeto would either be a winger or not have a place in current teams. In other words, Brazil has sacrificed its own football identity and history to produce players that cater to European needs. It's not that selling players is a problem, but we can't give up playing football here as well. Of course, we aim to make money from clubs, but the main goal is to ensure our teams are strong and win titles. After all, the ultimate objective is to have the best teams, win titles, and if possible, make a good profit. In summary, Brazil has sacrificed its own identity in pursuit of profits. The Brazilian national team rarely plays in Brazil, all to avoid inconveniencing European-based players by making them travel here for friendlies. There is so much to be done. However, the CBF has the financial means to achieve better outcomes for Brazilian football and the national team. This includes standardizing pitches, establishing a strong club league, negotiating with gaming platforms for league formats, and many other initiatives. As long as the management of Brazilian football treats everything related to it as trivial or minor, who will value us? The CBF shows disdain for Brazilian football, alienates fans from the national team, and creates controversy whenever possible. The Brazilian national team ends up reflecting the way this entity manages our football. Until they recognize these issues, only a miracle will restore Brazil to its former glory. Until then, the likelihood of this crisis persisting remains high. So, tell me in the comments if you agree with those opinions about Brazil. Share in the comments other stories you'd like to see here on The Beautiful Fever. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and see you in the next video.